People that are taking Valentine's Day for seeing people is just Thursday.
This should go on Friday.
Yeah, they can do like extra parties and stuff like real. Alright, here's what we're gonna talk about today, okay? You remember when we talked about the Enlightenment, that period, that scientific revolution, right? And then we moved, people started changing their way of thinking, using reason, using logic. And then we talked about the American Revolution and what caused that revolution, right? So at this time in history, right there around the 1700s, like 1776 to 1790, this kind of thinking was starting to change the whole world, okay? Especially when the colonists rose up against the British government and declared their independence. People in France, especially, took notice to that, okay? So today we're going to talk about some of those characteristics leading up to that revolution, okay? But before we do that, we need to talk about how is a revolution justified, okay? So let's look over here on this board, this focus question. This is the focus question. And keep in mind that this lesson about the French Revolution is going to go on for about 3 blocks, okay? We'll talk about it. We're going to get kind of deep into it. All right? But this focus question is one thing that we're going to focus throughout this whole unit, okay? So how can you justify challenging authority? Okay? So the first thing you have to do is you have to go through this sentence before you can answer that question and make sure that you know what all these words mean. You know what I mean? Like that. So is there any word in that sentence that you might have a question about that definition? There's no words. What about justify? Can somebody tell me what justify means? Payson, what's justify?
Give a good reason though, like if someone's challenging you, you gotta have a reason that they're doing it. Like they can't just be doing it just because they want to, you gotta have a reason.
Right. And those reasons are sometimes blurred lines too, right? Has anybody else got another definition of justify? Proven, kinda. So let me explain it to you. This is my definition of it, okay? So, you know how we got the Department of Justice? Like that makes our laws and enforces our laws and stuff like that? So, whenever you justify or something is just, that means that you're almost free from blame, okay? People don't blame you for doing that, okay? Like, that's justified. Now, if you was doing it for the wrong reasons, that would be unjustified. Does that make sense to you? We got a better understanding of what what kind we're talking about right now. Okay, so look at this question again. How can you justify challenging authority? And everybody knows what authority is, right? Colton, give me an example of authority.
Like, people watching that, like the principal of school, something like that.
Principal of the school. Yeah, give me another one. The president. Heidi, give me another one. What is authority? Just an example of authority. Yeah. Parents.
The police.
The police, right? But today, as we start off, this authority is going to end up meaning government, what we're talking about today, like the French government. But for the time being, let's talk about this so we can get a better understanding of it, okay? All right? Let me ask you this question, and then I want you to discuss it. Do you think the high school cell phone policy is just? Yeah? What do you think about that? There's no right or wrong answer, guys.
You want our opinion of it?
I want your opinion.
I think we should be able to use our phones like outside of class,
Yeah, that's what I think.
like during lunch in the halls,
Outside.
and just keep social media to a limit,
Like before the bell rings for classes started, you can be on your phone and stuff. Just
but
when
once class starts,
yeah, then you can put it up.
I like how Miss,
Changes.
I like how Miss Taylor does it, she makes us put our phones up before class, and then we don't have our phones on us at the end of the day, or at the end of the class, because.
Yeah, the last 5 minutes we get them out, we can
So-
sit there on them until the bell rings.
that would, us wanting our phones in class wouldn't affect us if we could just use them in the halls and stuff.
You get
Yeah, but
whatever
also-
business you have over with before class.
But I feel like doing that would, prevent us from getting to my, class faster, getting more stuff.
You just need to walk down the hall and use it.
Oh, man.
Colin, what you say? Good? What else? Chris, how you feel about it? You think it's a fair policy? Or a justified policy? No opinion on it, really?
Rules.
What about you, Ms. Ava? You think it's fair? It's kinda like a lot of laws, right? It's not cut black and white, right? There's some gray area in there, or those lines get blurred from it being just and unjust, right? Because there's some things that you can use it for that you know, like you say, if you have your grandma that she's the one that, or she counts on you, right? When she needs something, if she gets sick, and your only phone number that your grandma knows is yours, and you're at school, and something happens, she falls, and you're the only one that she can call. You see what I mean? So that's kind of blurry right there, because if you don't have your phone on you, she might just have to lay there until she can figure out how to call 911. But believe it or not, a lot of older people aren't technology savvy like we are. All right, let me ask you this. Huh? Yeah, the phone. Let me ask you this question. Do you think the cell phone policy of the Hamburg School District violates your human rights? Do you think it violates your human rights?
No comment.
Yeah, the cell phone policy.
I mean, I don't think it does.
That would be freedom of
That goes a
speech
little
and
bit
freedom of
over the
press,
line.
right?
Yeah.
One at a time. What'd you say?
That would kind of be freedom of speech and freedom of like press, right? Kind of, you know how people take pictures and stuff in school? And
Yeah.
like you like press.
Right. I see exactly what you're saying. So that, what you're saying, what Derek's saying is, like some of these, when we do some videos or we take pictures or something, and then they take our phones from us and we get in trouble for it. You know, he's thinking that's kind of stepping on his human rights because the Second Amendment or the First Amendment says we have a freedom of speech, right? I can understand that. I mean, totally. Does anybody else agree with Derek? Does anybody got anything they want to add? John Mark, you got anything you want to add?
No.
Not really?
But what if he takes a picture of someone who didn't want their picture?
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. When you're dealing with authority, okay? When
There's
you're
always
dealing-
has their ups and downs. There's never gonna be an even line for, it's never gonna satisfy everybody.
Yeah, it's never gonna be perfectly set up. It's
Us,
affect
not
some
having our
people.
phones.
There's always gonna be flaws in it.
Stuff, us not being able to go on our phones, that stuff's still gonna happen even if we
I mean,
did.
there are schools that have court.
Right.
Either way,
Either way, it's gonna-
Making rules where you can't just makes you wanna do it more.
What'd you say, Colin?
Making rules where you can't makes you wanna do it more.
Making rules where you can't makes you wanna do it
If
anyway.
they told us we could be on our phones more, I doubt, I mean, I know people would be on their phones, but I doubt they'd be on them as much in class because they, like Drake said, they'd have more time to do stuff walking down the hall and stuff they wouldn't wanna get on in class.
Like, their business would already be tended to.
Alright, so one thing that you'll run into, what authority would say, okay, which we're using our principals as our government, they're kind of the head of our government, right, here at school. But what they would say is, well, then we have a bunch of people in the hall not watching where they're going,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
knocking folks over, and then you'll probably be late to class because then you're gonna get to class and then have to go to the bathroom because I was on my phone. You see what I'm saying? When you're dealing with authority and you're dealing with policy, when you're dealing with a bunch of people, areas get shady, okay? There's never any black and white lines that say this is it and this is it, right? So you have to understand authority is always gonna come up with something, okay? They're always gonna have an answer. It's up to us to have an answer for that answer, right? And that brings us back to that central focus question. How can you justify challenging authority? Is there anything that you could do to challenge the Hamburg administration over that policy. Huh?
You could write to the school board or whatever.
Yeah, you could take.
We could go on strike.
Go on a strike, is what he said. You write to the school board, and that's what I wanna hear. Okay, so let's segue out of that cell phone policy just for a little bit, okay? We'll get back to it. But what I wanna look at now is, like you said, people will start writing letters to the government or the principal. People go on strike and stuff like that when they feel like their human rights are being restricted, okay? We're not saying they're stomping on our human rights. Well, like Derek said, they're kind of restricting them a little bit because of our Bill of Rights amendments, right? So let's look at this. Let's look at some of those enlightenment thinkers. Remember when you said we'll write a letter to the government or we'll write a letter to the principal about our cell phone policy? Remember this guy, John Locke, right? We talked about him in that enlightenment stuff. He wrote that Leviathan. Remember that? That was on our test. Well, this is an excerpt from one of his writings called The Second Treatise of Government, okay? So out of that title right there, who do you think he's going to be talking about?
The government.
The government, right? Who do you think he's going to be talking to?
The revolution.
The people, right? Because after you read this, you'll figure out that something's going on, somebody's restricting some rights for this topic to even come up, okay? So let's look at what I want to do is I want to go through this. I want to kind of dissect it or annotate it, if you will. And let's get the meaning out of some of this stuff because keep in mind these were Enlightenment thinkers in France in 1789. So they're not using the same language as we use today. Okay? They're using the same words, but they make it really complicated. But you guys are on top of your game. And I really feel like that you can pull one sentence out of here that would wrap all that up. So let's find that, okay? Let's find what this guy's talking about. Let's figure out what's going on in France at this time, okay? All right. The state of nature. What that means, the state of nature is almost like a state of equality, or a state of nature is man and woman before there's a model, okay? Like a society or a civilization. We've all had a model to follow. Our parents, they followed their grandparents. Their grandparents followed their parents. They've had some kind of model all the way through their lives to know how to behave and what laws, and you know what I'm talking about. But back in this time, there wasn't that much of a society model. There wasn't a governmental model, you see what I mean, that was proven that worked. So, that's what he's talking about, okay? The state of nature before that model, what you're born with, okay? This is what he's talking about. These are the rights and stuff that you're born with. So let's look at it. I'm going to read it all the way through first, okay? And be thinking about it, and then we'll go back through and break it down a little bit. Make sure that you use these sheets that I give you to make little notes, underline and stuff that we emphasize, okay? It says, but through this is a state of liberty. It isn't a state of license in which there are no constraints on how people behave. A man in that state is absolutely free to dispose of himself or his possessions, but he isn't at liberty to destroy himself, or even to destroy any created thing in his possession, unless its destruction is required for some nobler purpose. The state of nature is governed by a law that creates obligations for everyone, and reason, which is that law, teaches anyone who takes the trouble to consult it that because they are equal and independent, no one ought to harm anyone else in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Okay? So now let's take this first sentence. Let's not go any farther than that first sentence, okay? Keep in mind, everything up above this excerpt, he's talking about society being in a state of equality or a state of nature, okay? It says, but though this is a state of liberty, it isn't a state of license in which there are no constraints on how people behave. What he's saying is, this is not a free-for-all, okay? It's not where people just run around doing whatever they want to and we don't have any kind of law saying that, right? Because we do. We're in a state of liberty or a state of equality. So, in which which there are no constraints on how people behave. There are constraints on how we behave, right? A man in that state is absolutely free to dispose of himself or his possessions. A man in a state that has no state of nature or state of equality, okay? It says, a man in that state is absolutely free to dispose of himself or his possessions. But he isn't at liberty to destroy himself or even to destroy any created thing in his possession unless its destruction is required for some nobler purpose. This sentence right here talks about, my thinking, is that it's okay, it's not more, there's moral ethics to it, okay? Like, you can't just walk around, let's look at the possessions part. This is how you're gonna understand it. See where it says, or even to destroy any created thing in his possession unless its destruction is required for noble purpose. Say, Colton has a perfectly good barn, okay? Well, he comes into a little money, and he's gonna move his family away from that barn and his house, okay? Instead of selling that place or giving it to somebody, he decides, I can't have it, I don't want Christian to have it, so he sets a match to it, right? That's not how society's supposed to act, okay? Is that making sense to you guys, that right there, that part? Kinda? A little bit? All right, let's keep going, because remember, context clues, right? Everything that around it's going to kind of bring us back to a focus. You got a look on your face, Noel. What were you thinking?
The way I see it, or I see it of it, it was his barn. Wouldn't that mean he could do whatever he wanted with it?
He can. He can. Now look at this part. Or it should have been, I would have wrote it as, you shouldn't destroy any created thing in possession unless its destruction is required for some nobler purpose. What he's talking about here, get away from that barn, and in place of that barn, put a government there. See what I mean? So what he's saying, you can't jump out there and start trying to destroy the government unless there's a noble purpose. And what is a noble purpose? A good reason, right? Is that what you were trying to say? Kind of? Pacing.
Is that like, you know, it's like illegal to like, if you set your house on fire for no reason, like just to do it, like, a person my parents know, he was going through a divorce and his wife was like trying to take his house and he set it on fire so she could have it, but he went to jail for it. But like, they can set your house on fire if they find like asbestos or whatever inside the roof or stuff.
Right. So that, what he done wasn't necessarily a nobler cause.
Yeah, the noble reason was when if it had something inside like the house like that, that's just whatever.
Right. So what I'm saying is, whenever we're talking about challenging authority and being able to justify challenging authority, what he's saying is, unless there's a nobler cause, don't destroy things that you possess, like your rights, your liberty, your possessions.
And
Does that
also,
make it?
and also send a match to your, like, or setting your house on fire, that's the reason he probably went to jail for that is for the insurance.
Well, it's
A lot
arson.
of
It's against the
people,
law.
yeah, a lot of people do it for
Not
like
like
insurance
insurance,
money.
it's because it's actually.
But like Mason said,
Yeah.
if he'd have been setting that thing on fire to save his ex-wife and his kid's life from getting asbestos poisoning, would that be a nobler cause?
Yes.
It would to me, right? All right, so let's keep going. So we're good up to here, right? So we don't want to break our government loose unless it's for a nobler cause. Nobody can step on our rights, cell phone policy rights, unless it's for a nobler cause, like education, right? Is that making sense? All right, so let's keep going. The state of nature is governed by a law that creates obligations for everyone. Okay? Let's look at that sentence. Okay, tell me what that sentence means.
Which one?
The state of nature is governed by a law that creates obligations for everyone. What do you think that means? All right, anybody that you think you know Christian, give it to me.
Does it mean like everybody has a sort of freedom, but everybody has rules too?
Exactly what it means. It's good, wasn't it? Go ahead, Noel. What you got?
It creates opportunities for people.
It creates opportunities. All right, so yes, you're exactly right, Christian. The state of nature, which is the state of equality, is governed by a law that creates obligations for everyone. So our government creates these laws to make all of us equal. That's what we need. But also with that equality comes obligations, right? Not arson. Okay, you're not setting your house on fire because you're mad, right? That would be an example of what I'm using. All right, so everybody's good today? What you got, John Mark?
So, like, say you're burning leaves or something in your front yard, does it still count as arson if you catch your house on fire by accident?
No, it's not. No, that's not. That's just an accident. That's what they call it. But that's a good question. You know what I mean? Now, look at it this way though. If you were burning leaves beside your neighbor's house that never cleaned or washed his house or anything like that, and you kind of rake some leaves over there next to his fence, hoping it would catch it on fire, and catches the neighbor's house on fire while you're burning leaves, then that's probably arson. You see what I mean? But if you just do it by accident, that's not. Nobody's gonna put you in jail because you accidentally burn some leaves and burn your house down. It's happened in Hamburg. All right, let's go a little bit farther. It says, let's concentrate on this word right here, reason. Remember when we talked about the Enlightenment, we talked about people's thinking change. They started using reason and logic. Colton, you got a question? Okay. So that's what they're talking about when they're talking about reason, that logic. Okay? So it says, and reason, which is the law, teaches anyone who takes the trouble to consult it. Let's not go any farther than there. Let's understand what they're saying right there. So, reason is the law and teaches anyone who takes the time to use reason, consult it, that's what that means, okay? That because we are all equal and independent, no one ought to harm anyone else in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Anybody want to comment on that? Anybody know what that means in another way?
That means like, you can't, it's not right to kill anybody, like, hurt anybody purposely.
Based on your opinion.
Yeah, based on your opinion.
You can't take their stuff from yours.
We're all the same, so why try to hurt somebody else?
You can't go for it.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Why fight against each other when we got an army fighting against other countries?
That's just being equal.
Being equal. That's what he's talking. Now keep in mind who we're directing all this at, right? We're directing this at the authority. We're not talking about John, Mark hurting Devin or Chris hurting Ayana, okay? We're talking about the government restricting those cell phone policy kind of rights, okay? So what he's saying, reason, that's the key word. You've got to know what I'm talking about on reason, okay? And reason is the law, and reason teaches anyone who uses reason that we are all equal. What he's saying, if you use reason and logic, you'll know that we're all equal. And we're all independent. We're all put here on earth independently. No one ought to harm anyone else, not even the government, not in his life, not in his health, not in his liberty, rights, or his possessions, his house. No ever.
It's always about equal, but what about equity?
Equity is like, if I buy a car, okay, and then I get ready to sell that car, okay? Equity means the money that I would make off of it after I paid back what I bought that car for. Does that make sense? You got it like it's all, equity's almost like a value, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, here's what I want you to do. Equality is what you're thinking about, I hope that's what you're thinking about. I'm a little confused. All right, so here's what I want you to do on your sheet, okay? I want you to take the next 2 minutes, read through this by yourself. I want you to underline the best sentence that represents this passage. What we just got through discussing. Underline it or highlight it. Mark it somehow.
You said the best part?
Yes, ma'am. The sentence that best represents that. Alright, everybody done? Alright, let's have somebody, Deja, tell me what sentence that you think, in your opinion, best represents what we're talking about right here.
Well, I could have just said something, but I said, you are even independent, no one ought to harm anyone else whose life but live with you.
Anybody else agree with them? Right, that's the one that I would pick, okay? That's not the only one in there, but that right there, even when she cut it off like that, still wraps up everything we just got through discussing, right? Everything else he just says in a different way. Does that make sense? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to underline that sentence, what she just said. Can you read it a little bit louder today?
We are all equal and independent, no one ought to harm anyone else in whose life no duty or business.
Okay? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to put a quotation mark around the W of we and at the end. And then I want you to underline and mark that sentence. And I want you to write underneath that sentence, this is support. This is evidence.
Put the last one around independent.
Right here around possessions. Got me? Right underneath that sentence. This is important when you write this. This is support. This is evidence. Okay? Alright. So put that sheet aside. We'll use that later. And what I want to do now is I'm fixing to pair you up. Okay? And the way we're going to pair up is front row, you'll turn around, and you'll be paired with the person behind you. Third row, you'll turn around and be paired up with the person behind you. Chris, you'll go back and pair up with Bryce and Brady. Okay, is that right? Okay, so do that now. Let's pair up. You don't have to move your chair. You can if you want to. Okay. This is part of the social contract. Remember we talked about that during the Enlightenment. That's the whole big deal of the Enlightenment, that social contract, right? This guy, Rousseau, writes a little bit easier than the other guy, John Locke. John Locke inspired this guy to write these. This is kind of what our society, even modern society, is based on these words. Our Declaration of Independence was based on these words. Thomas Jefferson was an Enlightenment thinker. Okay? So what I want you to do for the next 5 or 10 minutes with your partner, read it to each other, underline it to underline those important words. If you need a dictionary to figure out a word, there's dictionaries over there. I want you to get up and I want you to use that dictionary to find out the meaning of that word. I want to know, just like on that last one, give me one sentence when we come back. Give me one sentence that best represents this passage. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, go.
I won't tell you.
On be able to work, you know, Everybody done reading? Okay, let's look at this. Let me read it for you, okay? And then I'm gonna have one of you read it.
Can I read it?
You can, Dave. All right, it says, sometimes, follow along with me here, okay? Sometimes when you hear somebody else read it, it becomes a little bit more clear. All right? It says, the question is often asked how individuals, having no right to dispose of their own lives, can transfer to the sovereign a right which they do not possess. The difficulty of answering this question seems to me to lie in its being wrongly stated. Every man has a right to risk his own life in order to preserve it. Has it ever been said that a man who throws himself out the window to escape from a fire is guilty of suicide? Has such a crime ever been laid to the charge of him who perishes in a storm because when he went on board, he knew of the danger? Okay? Did y'all understand that one a little better than the first one? Okay, what's he saying right here when it says, has it never been said that a man who throws himself out the window to escape from a fire is guilty of suicide? What's he mean? John Mark.
He's choosing his fate, because he believes he's gonna die anyway from the fire, so he's choosing his fate to go quicker.
Exactly right.
Burning to death.
That's right. He knew of the dangers from jumping from that window, right?
He has a better chance of living jumping out that window
Yeah,
than
he
does
feels
in
his
the fire.
survival chances are greater than just standing in fire for a little while.
All right, let's look at that next question that he asked. Has such a crime ever been laid to the charge of him who perishes in a storm because when he went on board he knew of the danger? What's that mean?
That,
Like the Titanic.
Yes, exactly.
Like he's-
Like
if you get on a boat and like there's a storm, that means you like didn't know the storm, so if you die from it, you didn't just willingly get on the boat to die, it means you got on the boat.
Like the captain.
Like if you
Oh,
went
oh,
over,
regular train or
Just
something.
sum it up.
what'd you say, Chris?
Just sum it up.
So you know the dangers before you got on the boat. You knew there was a possibility. There's a storm
Like
coming,
the
right?
people that are working that boat or whatever can be charged with murder when you're the one that chose to get on there in the first place.
So, a man or woman rises up against a government. That's kind of what he's saying. You know the dangers, okay? You know the dangers of it. But are you just going to lay there and let them trample all over your rights and your life and your possessions? You know the danger. That's what he's saying. All right? So, Dave, she wanted to read. I want you to hear it one time. Read along one more time. This is important to our lives. This is what set the stage for America. Okay? Go ahead and read that whole thing for me, Dave.
The question is often asked, how individuals having no right to dispose of their own lives can transfer to the
Sovereign.
sovereign, a right which they do not possess. The difficulty of answering this question seems to me to lie in its being wrongly stated. Every man has a right to risk his own life in order to preserve it. Has it ever been said that a man who throws himself out of the window to escape from a fire is guilty of suicide? Has such a crime ever been laid to the charge of him who perishes in a storm because when he went on board, he knew of the danger?
Good. All right, let's go back to the top. Let's look at the one word and they're sticking out to me. Bigger than any of them. I've asked a couple of them. That's sovereign word, okay? We need to know what that word means. Alex, tell us what that word means. What sovereign means? Politically independent. Do you know what that, does that make sense to, let me better phrase it. We're a government that stands alone, okay? America is a sovereign nation because we have one independent government and we don't depend on other countries, right? That's what sovereign means, all right? The difficulty of answering this question seems to me to lie in its being wrongly stated. Like, we're asking ourselves all the right questions sometimes. That's why we've ended up in this spot. Where we got kings and people oppressing us, okay? After you read it, 3 or 4 times, I want to know what is the main sentence out of there that wraps it all up in this thing right here, okay? Let me get Braden Harlan. Tell me what sentence you got.
Every man has a right to risk his own life in order to
I
preserve.
got to give you 5 on that, Lewis. Come on. Did everybody else get that sentence?
Yes,
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you got that sentence and you think that best represents everything.
Every man has a right to use his own
Good.
authority.
That's exactly what I wanted you to do. You see, when you slow down and you work together, you can decipher through some of this language, right? So that does represent every man has a right to risk his own life in order to save it. Right? That's powerful stuff. I want you to underline that or highlight it, and then I want you to write out beside it, this is support, this is evidence. Right, now I want you to look over here at this wall for me. Let's not forget what we're talking about. It all revolves around that question, right? How can you justify challenging authority? At the end of our unit, not the end of today, but at the end of these 3 lessons when we talk about this will be the question that you will answer. And you will be able to write a bunch of stuff because look, this is your support. This is your evidence. You got it right in front of you now, right? This is how we do research. This is how historians think. Okay? So what I want to do now, I want to do something that kind of sets the stage for these people in France. Okay? That really ticked them off. This was the final straw. Okay? That broke the camel's back. Alright, look over here. First thing we got to look at is this pyramid here. You remember the first week of school we started this pyramid deal with every civilization. And what does that pyramid represent? Hierarchy, or what's another word for hierarchy? Social classes or social structure. Good Christian. So we always talk about this coming up through history, right? That 1% of the population are the kings and the nobility, right? That's what nobility means, or the kings and queens. And then this little section right here, in medieval times, who was that?
The bird.
The knights, the merchants, right? The people that sold things. And then you have the peasants, which are people like us that work for a living, okay? So what we call these people right here become really important in France, okay? Because these guys are kind of working together now. They figured it out, okay? But what they call these guys, instead of merchants or knights, they call them bourgeoisie. Remember, we're in France, okay? So, what's up, Pacey?
When I was in Miss, Wilder class, they're taking my civic exam, they were talking about that, and they said that's probably where the word bougie comes from, because it's like,
That's exactly what
high
it
class stuff.
is. Bad and bougie, y'all heard that song? Right? That's what they're talking about. That bougie, that's what he's talking about, okay? He's not talking about one individual, he's talking about a group of people, okay? So this bourgeoisie, when you think bourgeoisie, you think merchants, we're not talking about those people like in the mall, in the middle of the mall, selling sunglasses, okay? We're talking about corporations.
No.
Apple, okay? Walmart, the people that, not the people that work there, the people that own it, where all the money goes, okay? These people, you know by now, studying history, that people with money and wealth hold a lot of power, right? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to pay attention to this 1%, okay? I want you to pay attention to this 5%, and I want you to pay attention to this 94%, okay? Now here's what I want to do. Let me get my bearings. I'm going to walk around, and you're going to draw one piece of paper, okay? If you draw a P, I want you to gather up right here at the door. If you draw a B, I want you to gather in the middle of the room, about right there where Payson sits, okay?
What if we get a K?
Okay. Can I have your attention? All right, if you've got a key, move now to the door.
We're all peasants.
He just got there, just got
All right, that's okay. Don't get it around here.
What?
All right, here's what we're doing. This is how, okay? Obviously by now, where you going? All right, obviously by now, that you know that the P stands for peasants, and the B stands for bourgeoisie, and the K stands for the king, right? All right, because there's always got to be an authority figure, and I figure we're not going to argue about that. I'm going to be the king. So what we're going to do, you're going to gather up over here, you're going to talk amongst yourselves, and you're going to nominate one person to be your spokesperson. Okay? We're gathering up. Think about this. Let me set the stage. Listen to hang on. So what we're doing is we're at the town hall. Okay? You need a spokesperson to speak for your group. I'm speaking for my group. They'll have to have a spokesperson to speak for their group. It doesn't matter to you. Just get you a spokesperson and then I'll tell you what we're going to talk Okay. Order in the court. Order in the court. Do we have a spokesperson?
No, they didn't.
Noel is the spokesperson for the peasants.
I am also their spokesman.
Who's the spokesperson for the bourgeois? It's Bryce. I'm the spokesperson for the nobility. Today in court, we will cast a vote to pass on our next exam. You can use your cell phones to research the answers, and you will have a pizza party afterwards. So that's something that you got to vote on. Do you want to use, in other words, do you want to use your phones on your next test, and do you want a pizza party afterwards? We're going to discuss it amongst yourself. Discuss it with your.
What's the catch?
Well, just say yes, we all say yes.
Okay.
And if we say no, they all have to be.
Order in the court. Order in the court. Order in the court. All right. All in favor for using your cell phones on your next exam and having a pizza party afterwards, raise your hand.
Y'all raise your hand. What y'all doing?
All against using your cell phones and having a pizza party on our next exam, raise your hand.
Are you guys at a party?
So what that means is you guys lose. So here's what I'm trying to do, guys.
Peasants didn't do anything.
Huh?
Peasants didn't do
I just said I go all in detail, so.
Listen to me. Here's what I want to prove to you, okay? Remember that hierarchy structure that I just showed you? I'm the 1%. Here's the 5%. You are the 94%.
No matter what we say, if you counter it, you win.
No, we wouldn't counter it. We have to align our votes.
Well, I'm saying, but if y'all all vote against us, then y'all win.
They count for, these three guys count for one vote.
Think about it.
What do you count for?
There's
One
more of
vote.
us than them.
You guys count for one vote. Right? Your spokesperson counts as one vote.
So
That's
like,
it.
if you said yes and they said no, then it'd only be one versus one.
If they would've said, they would've voted for you to do that, the peasants would've won. But what I'm trying to do, take that cell phone policy and throw it out the window. Now think about food. Okay? No, I'm thinking about, I mean, seriously, surviving. Because that's what they were arguing about. So, in other words, I'm saying, let me tell you what I told them, okay? To get them to vote my way. This is how the government was. Let me tell you what I told them. I was like, look, I'm fixing to come up with this plan where they're gonna vote to use their phones and have a Christmas or a pizza party. I was like, if you guys vote with me, you won't even have to take the test. I'll give you 100 points test, plus 15 bonus points, and you'll get pizza. That's a no-brainer for them, isn't it? So, can you imagine back in the day when they were doing this together, talking about taxing on food? Like, okay,
Quite a
look,
lot of tea back today.
guys, listen to me. Like, John Mark, listen to me. Back then, what they got so upset, they were taxing these peasants for flour. What they done exactly what, we got you over in the corner or locked you out. We got there early, we discussed, hey, we're running out of flour, okay? There's a lot of people, we're running out of flour, what do we do? Hey, let's get the peasants to pay the taxes. Okay, all in favor of peasants paying taxes, bam, they raise their hand, they vote. They count for one vote, I count for one vote. Okay, you're 94% of the population, you count for one vote. Do you see why people were starting to get upset? These are the richest people in your society, and they're not paying taxes on the flour that you were growing. You're the one paying taxes for these guys. Do you understand what I'm talking to you? Can you see where these people can start talking about those things, being oppressed, and those people trampling on rights? Go ahead and get back in your seats.
That's when people start getting slaughtered.
It's like you can tell them that they have a say so, but they really don't.
Did we say no else?
You can tell them that they have a say. Like you can tell them that authority has say.
Listen to me, like, it was a lot, I mean, I know that's fun and games, right? But it was serious back in those days. These bourgeois people, Walmart, Apple, and then the king, Donald Trump, would get together, okay? Well, I'm just using them as examples. They would get together before you would even get there. They would lock the doors and wouldn't even let you in the town hall until they got their vote together. And then they let you in, because no matter what you vote for, as long as we voted together, we got the same amount, right? It's kind of the way we vote today on our president, right? Like sometimes, like Donald Trump became president and did not win the popular vote. And that the popular vote means he didn't get the most votes, okay? But they have that electoral college that each state, depending on their population, gets so many votes. So some states' votes count more than other states. See what I mean? That's what was going on right here. All right, so here's what I want to do now. I want you to get out a clean piece of paper, and this will be your exit ticket, okay? But I want to talk to you about a few things first. Clean piece of paper, let's move.
I heard you guys don't get this.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll take that. All right, let's pay attention. So give me about 10 more minutes of your time, okay? Look over here at the board, everybody. I want you to write this question at the top of your page. Do you feel, listen, I don't have to repeat it. Do you feel the French voting process was just or worth fighting for? Remember, just is justified, that's what we're talking about, or worth fighting for. And I want you to tell me why. Don't start writing yet, just write the sentence. Yes.
That means we get no pizza.
This is the way we're going into the French Revolution. This is how it all started, was over that voting process. They were getting ticked off about it.
Does this mean no pizza?
Huh?
Does this mean no pizza? Dang it.
Yeah, I'm mad. I thought
You voted for it.
I'm going on
Yeah,
strike.
we
Well, we were
voted.
gonna get pizza anyway. Look, you said we get 100 on this list, plus we keep on for it, and
Alright, let's pay attention.
She try to eat.
Alright, look at me. What you're gonna do, you're gonna write me a well-written paragraph. And when I say a well-written paragraph, I mean with complete sentences, neatly where I can read it. And there needs to be 5 or 6 sentences, okay? There's a rubric, okay? Here's how I'm gonna grade you. Let me show you some examples of the way I wrote the top one, and some other students wrote the bottom two, okay? If you want to score a 0 to a 2, you would write something like this, right? I would have fought to change the government. It didn't matter what the peasants thought because it was a monarchy. It isn't fair. That's not gonna cut it. First and foremost, if somebody walked in out of our class that didn't know what we were talking about, and they just read your written description here of what we got to do, they don't know what you're talking about. There's no details, there's no evidence, there's no support, right? All right, here's one that was a little better. Another student wrote this one, and they received a 2 to a 4, okay? Yes, I do think the voting process was unjust, because no one would get anywhere if we did not fight for our rights. Someone should not be labeled on how much money they do or do not have. I do think if you want to have something worth having, you must have to work to get it. I think the peasants were justified by fighting for what they thought was best for them. That's pretty good, but it still didn't give me any details about the voting process, right? And it gave me no evidence, and it gave me no support. And we've seen that those primary documents, what you read today, remember you wrote on each one of those, you got your 2 sentences, that is evidence and support, right? Now let's look at this one that scored a 6. I wrote, okay? I feel that the French voting process was unjust and worth fighting for because the majority of the people were peasants with only 1 vote. What makes this cause worth fighting for is that the nobility and bourgeoisie would combine their votes, then align their views to benefit themselves without including the peasants. They were also imposing taxes on the peasants without paying taxes themselves, which was one of the major causes of the American Revolution. Okay, where am I at? In Rousseau's social contract, he states, here's my evidence and my support, every man has a right to his own life in order to preserve it. This quote reflects the idea that all men are created equal and no vote should count more than the next. Therefore, it is unjust and worth fighting for the natural rights of men and women. That's a 6. You see why? Do you see why?
That's the high you can go.
That's as high as you can go. Okay? So why? I'll start right here by answering that question, right? And then I'll follow it up with an explanation of why. Okay? Give me the details of what we talked about. Give me the details of the story, right? And then back it up with your evidence that you wrote down on there. You've got 2 examples of support and evidence, right? This is how you write historically. It's different than writing in English class, okay? You've got to have evidence. You've got to use details. Look at my thinking here at the top. I started with, I feel that the French voting process was unjust and worth fighting for. And then I ended with, it is unjust and worth fighting for the natural rights of men and women. I rounded it all off. You see what I mean? You can come in my class and you can read that and know exactly what we're talking about. Got me? All right, let's take the next 10 minutes and give me a good solid paragraph, kind of like this one. Don't copy what I've been writing. Because I will pop.
Well, I'm still in the beginning of